The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It is now the fourth episode of this show. I have some more things to say about it this week that I didn't say last week. It's kind of starting to go somewhere, which I appreciate. I'm going to just spend some time talking about what I like, what I don't like, and where I kind of see the future of the show. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. So I've talked about the kind of middling and dragging of the first three episodes of this show, and a lot of that continues here. This is the longest episode of the show so far. I think it's like an hour and 10 minutes. And it just kind of continues to be boring. There are some things that I'm kind of starting to like about the show, and there's things that continue to just plague it and drag it down. It really, in this episode, felt a lot like kind of Game of Thrones light, which I don't really like. What I like about the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is that it's not a political show. You know what I mean? Like, there's kings and queens and princesses and stewards and all of this stuff going on, but it never really detracts from the main show or the main series and the main storyline with Frodo and the Fellowship. And it seems like the Rings of Power is getting bogged down in some of that political nonsense. I just don't care about any of it. And it's disappointing because at the very end of the show, in the last like 10 minutes, it seems like it finally starts to go somewhere. And there's actually a major thing that happens that I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is finally something interesting that I'm excited about. I like the storyline of Elrond and Durin. And it's cool to see Elrond go from like this kind of, plucky's not really the right word, but this optimistic, regal character, and he's starting to become a little bit bitter and a little bit sour, and he's starting to become a little bit pessimistic. And I like that his character actually seems to have something resembling an arc. Galadriel is still kind of the same. She is maybe starting to develop a little bit, become a little bit cynical as well, while still having this quest that she's hell-bent on seeing through to the end, which is, finding out about Sauron and ultimately bringing about his downfall. And so I'm excited to see that it finally does some stuff at the end. But the problem is, it also just drags. And there's not, I don't need this to be a show that's just all balls to the wall action. But this show is just at times really, really boring and unengaging. And it's a huge problem. One of the criticisms that Christopher Tolkien had of the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's trilogy, I should start calling it that, is that it was too action heavy and it relied too much on spectacle and big sets and explosions and action. And so he criticized it. And now, as a result, they didn't want Peter Jackson involved in this series. They now famously asked him if he wanted to be involved. He said, I would need to see a script first. And then they said, okay, cool, we'll send you one. And then they friggin' ghosted him. They ghosted Peter Jackson. And I think they did so at the behest of Christopher Tolkien, who passed a couple years ago. And now we're seeing the fruit of that, which is that the show is just boring because it's, instead of like being an action-oriented show, it's just getting bogged down in the politics of Middle Earth and all these foreign lands and stuff. So remain cautiously optimistic, but they really need to pick up the pace. And there's what happens at the end of this show hopefully leads to better things in the next couple episodes, because it's a problem. Amazon can't screw this up. They've invested so much freaking money in this thing that they have no choice but to make it succeed. So no matter what happens with this season, they got to get it right. They have too much riding on it. They spent so much money that they have to make it work. They have to get some sort of ROI, some sort of return on their investment, because otherwise, what did they spend all that money for in the first place? So we'll see what happens. I'm excited about some of the subplots. I really need more of Elrond and Durin, because I do see some potential in their relationship and what's going on there in there's going to be some like fraying between their relationship and their friendship. And the show finally starting to kind of get into that. And I'm excited to see what happens with them. Some of the other subplots, don't care. Yeah, that's kind of it. We'll see. The fact that I'm not like gung ho for or against this show right now is, I guess, the best I could hope for. Considering I know a lot of people hated this episode, and it's easy to see why, because it just drags on and on and on. But it ends well. So we'll see what happens with episode 5 on Friday, and that's my review. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. Am I way off base? Is this complete and utter trash or the greatest thing on TV? Let me know. Hit me up. Follow me on social media at RealHometown0 on Instagram, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.